I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council at 6:30. May we please have the roll call?
Councilmember Haroff?
Here.
Councilmember Way?
Here.
Councilmember Chu?
Here.
Vice Mayor Morrison?
Here.
And Mayor Hilmer.
Here. If you're able, would you please rise and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda this evening, we have 3 presentations, and which will take up the bulk of our agenda this evening. So the first one we're pleased to have is a Preservation Award, the 2017 Heritage Preservation Award to the owners at 143 Madrone Avenue. I'm familiar with this property. This is very exciting. May we have a staff report?
I think someone hopefully from the Heritage Board's here to make a presentation. No?
Okay.
We might want to postpone. I'm not sure the status, Mr. Mayor, but
Do we have the award here this evening?
I think that must
To
be with the
present?
person who's supposed to bring it.
Well, we have the crowd here, so we should do it anyway.
Wow.
Well, why don't we invite people up to talk about
I think perhaps we should take the items out of order, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, sorry for that. We'll take these items out of order. Maybe someone representing the Heritage Board will show up. Are the property owners here this evening?
They're here, yeah, and part of the Heritage.
And Hillary Culhane is here from the Heritage Board. Why don't we pretend we have the award? And then this will be a dress rehearsal.
Can you come back again next month? I wasn't
We can show you off again.
I wasn't planning to speak, but I do remember this project because it was at the beginning of my tenure, and it was such a joy to watch the construction and the improvement of what we call the honeymoon cottage, Madrone Avenue, and that building was literally saved by your work. And I know there'll be more detail about the project itself and the process next month when we get the plaque. I think we're still waiting on the plaque to arrive. But I just wanted to say congratulations and good job.
And this is Mr. Keith Fontana, is that correct? Hi. Just from my own experience, I want to comment. I've had the good fortune to see you and your work through good times, tough times, complex times, and I want to tell you how grateful we are that you have decided that Larkspur is a good place for you to do your projects, and I think this award is timely in that I think it represents more than just this particular property, in my opinion. Sally Ann? Yes. So I want to show my appreciation for your contribution to the community.
I consider Larkspur my own.
My name is Sally Ann Wilson. I had the privilege of being on the Heritage Preservation Board for many years. And I just wanted to speak to this award because it was, the whole concept came up while I was on the board. And in fact, my husband, Jack Wilson, who's here, suggested after we came back from a trip where we went to Portland and stayed in the historic district, there are a lot of old homes there, and they had very nice plaques that were recognizing the owners. And the issue is not only the recognition that the homes deserve by other people, but the people themselves who go to the trouble of buying a house, fixing a house according to standards, which in Portland are even more difficult than here, is a very special thing. And so Jack said, you know, you should have something like that in Larkspur. And so the idea was discussed, ultimately approved, and the awards program, the first awardees were the Lark Theater when that just started. And so over the years, we've been trying to just call attention to the commitment, the money, the time, and the love that people have for their homes that are old. Because we see all around us houses being torn down. And I just want to commend Keith Fontana for the work that he did. Prior to doing that house, he had redeveloped another historic house in Larkspur on Locust Avenue. And this commission, or the board, the Larkspur Heritage Preservation Board, has helped Larkspur attract people to it because in great part of our history. So I just want to thank him and urge other owners of homes that are historic to consider the alternative to trying to tear them down or make major changes, but there's something to learn in order to be a real member of the Larkspur community. So thank you, Keith.
Thank you. Well, I would also comment, the city benefits from project proponents and contractors who live in the community, such as Mr. Fontana, because over the years, these projects are very complicated and difficult, and quite often under sets of non-conforming conditions, which collectively is the charm of the city. So our rules quite often run counter to the interests of homeowners through making things maybe more difficult, more expensive, more complex than somebody building a home from scratch on a flat lot. So showing the city how to balance the preservation regulation so that things can actually be feasible. I think we owe a great deal of credit to the builders who help show us how we can make things feasible. We're still not there yet, are we, Keith?
This one was much better than the first one.
But your patience and persistence allows us to get there. So I just want to say, you know, it's not just a one-sided.
Well, thank you, and it goes both ways, because I've learned a lot too, so I know kind of what is possible and what isn't, so it's much easier to go down the road of possibility than letting that.
Well, thank you for hanging in there with us. And in spite of it all, I think we can be proud of the results.
I am as well, it's very worth.
Great. Continue to next month.
All right. Are there other members of the public that would like to make comments on this presentation? If not, we'll move to the next presentation, which is an update on smart operations and the Larkspur extension. We'll provide, I would imagine there's, Mr. Fontana, there's a formal document for you.
I guess next month.
Okay, we'll make sure that that's here for you.
Okay,
Thank you, and again, congratulations. Welcome.
Good evening,
Nice to
Mayor
see you
Helmer.
again.
Yes, it's been a while. And council members, my name is Bill Gamlin. I'm the chief engineer with SMART. Here this evening to provide you with an update and kind of big picture of the SMART passenger rail system, and especially the details of the Larkspur extension project, which extends SMART from downtown Santa Fe to Larkspur Landing. So with that in mind, I can have a two-part presentation, start with big picture of what SMART's been doing since the summer when we started operating, and then delve into some of the details of the Larkspur extension project itself. Ultimately, SMART is a 70-mile passenger rail system from Cloverdale to Larkspur. We opened our initial operating segment, which extends from northern Santa Rosa to downtown Santa Fe, 43-mile initial system. This past summer, August 25th, we started moving passengers. We run 7 two-car train sets. We built out the whole system with the idea of expanding, and the Larkspur project would be that first expansion down to the southern limits. A few things on the details of SMART. We run diesel multiple unit trains. Our high speed is 79 miles an hour. In some of the areas, we've got 34 trips a day, 10 trips on the weekends. Our pullout in the morning is at 4:19 in northern Santa Rosa. And then the north pullout in the morning is about 6 a.m. in downtown Santa Fe, and the last train leaving Santa Fe is at 8:35. A list of our stations, I won't go through them, and of course, we've got Larkspur coming soon. A little bit on our trains, we refer to them as diesel multiple units. Essentially, they're self-propelled rail cars. They're running with the cleanest burning diesel technology available. They're fairly comfortable. If you hadn't ridden them, we invite you to do so. Fully accessible, meet all ADA requirements, level boarding. It's a pretty comfortable ride. Couple shots of the interior. We've got a lot of bike space, and we have found that we are moving a lot of bicycles, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 every weekday. So a lot of our commuters and riders are using the bicycle to get that last couple miles of their trip. Each train, we're running them in 2-car units, has a restroom, and then we have a snack bar on one of the cars as well. It's run by a nonprofit, and it serves mostly local fares from Marin and Sonoma counties. SMART is fully electronic ticketing with the Clipper card, which is used throughout the Bay Area. Same card gets you onto the ferry system, BART, Muni, VTA, throughout the Bay Area. We have a ticket vending machine at each platform where you can buy a Clipper card, but if you're familiar with the system, once you have your card, you can load it electronically, load it through the internet, or load it on a ticket vending machine. We have a mobile app as well that allows you to do a one-time fare. If you have visitors from out of town or something, it's an easy way to ride the train as well. And we do have paid parking at our lots where we do have parking. It's also done through an app as well. It's the same system that Golden Gate Transit utilizes. So a little bit on the Larkspur Extension project. These are the major elements in the project. Of course, we have one station at the end of our 2.1-mile extension. That's at Larkspur Landing, just below 101, tucked in the hillside there. We will utilize the Cal Park Tunnel. That was recently reconstructed in 2009 and opened to bicycle pedestrian traffic in 2010, as well as Anderson Drive. It's a big crossing we're hitting in Santa Fe. We have what's called the Francisco Flip, which I'll go into some details in a moment in Santa Fe. We pass through the transit center in downtown Santa Fe, and we've got 3 bridges as well on the project. To look at that graphically, we start on the north end of the project. As we leave the downtown station heading southbound, we pass through the Bettini Transit Center. The next big piece of work is the Francisco Flip, where SMART is kind of trading places with West Francisco Boulevard in Santa Fe. It allows us to close a couple grade crossings. I've got a couple slides that I'll show you on that. Crossing Anderson Drive, through the Cal Park Tunnel, and then to the station in Larkspur. So from north to south, as we pass through the Bettini Transit Center, we've got some modifications within the transit center we're doing. Currently, there's a single track that passes through the transit center. It's where the taxis used to wait for passengers. And the 2-track alignment will extend across 2nd, across 3rd, across 2nd, and then across Santa Fe Creek to the south.
Bill, can I ask you a question?
Yes?
Back on the previous slide. Is there any likelihood that, Mike, please?
Is there any possibility that the permanent transit center will be in the same location as the current transit center?
That's something that Golden Gate's studying now with the city. I don't believe so. I think they're looking at locations between 3rd and 4th and.
Well, I know they're looking at those. I was just wondering if is it likely everything else will get eliminated with this being the only remaining? Is there any chance this could end up being the final?
I don't think so. I
Okay,
think they're looking
thank
at other spots within this vicinity. So a little bit on the Francisco flip. I won't spend a ton of time since this is on the other side of the hill in San Rafael. The dashed green line is the center line of Francisco Boulevard. This is 101, of course, 2nd Street here to put it into perspective. The red is the existing railroad alignment that comes through. By trading places, we're able to close these 2 railroad crossings. It helps the city out, makes it a much safer alignment through here. So once this is flipped, we have the double track alignment heading south. The green represents the realigned West Francisco Boulevard, and the yellow is the multi-use pathway that the city's currently designing and working on that would connect 2nd to Anderson, which then connects to the tunnel as well. So a very nice connection piece. Anderson Drive gets reconstructed. I won't spend a lot of time on that. As you know, the tunnel was remined in 2009. The bike path was opened in 2010. It's a fabulous facility that really makes connection between Larkspur and San Rafael work really well. We'll be tying into that. And then down in Larkspur itself, a few things on the station itself. So to orient everybody, this is the northbound on-ramp to Highway 101. The theater is right down here. This is the old airporter site that Golden Gate Transit currently uses for the overflow parking. In 2009, the pathway through the tunnel was built and included the horseshoe connection here down to grade. And then just recently, TAM and the county constructed the overcrossing over Sir Francis Drake, which extended the pathway south here. This will be the smart platform in this location. It all ties nicely with the multi-use path. Currently, there is a driveway that leads up to what Golden Gate had been using for overflow parking. We'll be adding a drop-off area here with a plaza that leads up to the station, and then some limited parking down here with a small turnaround at the end for flexibility. We've really squeezed as much out of this site as we can. It's kind of benched into the hillside there, above the theater, above Larkspur Landing, just below the freeway. Any questions on the station while I've got
I
the
do.
slide up?
Councilmember Way?
So Bill, in that blue section, can you tell me how many parking places you intend to have permanent there?
We're figuring about 30 spots,
30. And of that, how many would be disabled parking?
probably about 5. There's a proportion on that that needs to be met.
And that's the maximum that's available in that, or is that the maximum planned?
That's the maximum space that's really available up there.
So what are the plans then if passengers park down in the old Marin Airporter lot?
This is controlled by Golden Gate Transit. They're going to want their patrons to use it. It's got the same Park Mobile Pay app to park there, so I'm not sure if they can distinguish on what your destination is, whether it's the ferry or Smart or not.
And in reference to the parking at the north base, at the terminus at the north, how many parking places are there?
Terminus at the north.
Well, where the train starts in Cloverdale or where it starts in Santa
Our
Rosa, I guess.
farthest north right now is Airport, and
Airport.
we probably have about 20 to 30 spots at the airport spot.
Are they, and the occupancy of that, is that pretty high?
Airport's pretty full, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it picks up folks from the north, especially Windsor, coming down to catch the train.
So the access for somebody with a disability, they would come out of the platform and then go all the way down to that turnaround? Or is there, that's the closest point in which someone could actually get physically to a car? Or a bus?
Yes, there'd be, our platforms are high level. They're 4 feet
I've been
above
on.
top of rail. So there'll be a ramp that leads down from the platform and then just access area. So this would be the first connection to a vehicle, that's correct.
And is that the same connection that would be for emergency access? Let's say they need to bring a fire truck?
Pretty much, yeah. We also have access down here that was built when the tunnel was constructed.
I'm just very concerned about parking. That's why I keep asking about
Sure.
that. Are there plans, or have there been discussed plans for building a multi-level parking garage?
I think Golden Gate has explored that idea in this area. We have not explored that idea up here at this point, but there might be opportunities in the future for something like that.
And when you were exploring parking ideas, was there other areas of that plot along the route of the train that was looked at?
For this station?
Yeah, for that station.
No, this really is all the available space we have up here. We've got the center platform, tracks on both sides. We've got a tail track that we can have a train that's out of storage, staged for an event like a Giants game or something. we've utilized this whole level area, and once you hit this point, this drops off down to
Right.
Sir Francis Drake. There really is no more space up there.
Okay,
I want to continue the
Yeah.
parking just for a minute. So you're going to, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So Bill, you're going to bring a smart train, which we're excited about, and you're only going to add 40 spaces? 30?
That is correct.
Doesn't that concern you?
You know, a lot
For
of our
the city of
stations
Larkspur?
don't have any parking at them, and they seem to be getting pretty good ridership. Downtown Santa Fe doesn't have any additional parking other than what exists today.
So are you working with Golden Gate Transit to make sure, I mean, there's a concern for us
Mm-hmm.
because we already have a parking issue just with the ferry.
Sure.
So we're probably going to have more people because of that coming and going. So we
Yeah,
just don't
it's
want
a
to have a
good
train come
chance-
in and we have a problem like I think we're going to face.
Yeah, we're utilizing every inch of our right-of-way pretty much to add facility, add bike path, add parking. So at this
Are
point.
you concerned for us at all with how the layout is?
Not particularly. We're doing the best we can with what we have to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions before Bill continues? Councilmember Hara.
Just a quick one. Will there be any electric vehicle charging facilities installed in the parking area near the smart station area, or the smart station?
What we've been doing where we've been building parking ride lots in the system is putting in provisions for electric vehicles, so we get the conduits in the ground, correctly size the power distribution, but we haven't put the stations in yet. So we're trying to get the core infrastructure in.
So who would then put those stations in?
That might be something we would do in the future with a grant. We might work with an agency like TAM for something like that.
Okay, so right now, there's no funding for any electrical vehicle charging operations? Are there identified grant opportunities that you are considering exploring?
I'm not aware of them, but then I'm not the person in the agency that pursues grants. It's very likely there's some opportunities out there.
Have you been, Diane, did you want to answer that?
Good evening, Diane Steinhauser with TAM. Yeah, we are working with SMART and paying for the installation of the electrical, and then we'll be following up with our funds to put in the actual charging stations. So we have a game plan to install the charging stations. And I don't know if we have any in, but we'd be glad to share some information on schedule for that. But we do have a plan for installation.
Do you have an idea how many facilities are going to go in there?
We did like three spots maybe?
Maybe 2 or 3 per station area.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Larry?
I don't know if you have it on another slide, but can you describe how the passenger pickup and drop-off will work?
We have the turnaround area right here. There would be just a quick drop-off area for folks.
Yeah, so you're not anticipating that that'll happen on Sir Francis Drake?
No.
Yeah, there's not a
I
whole
wouldn't
lot
think
of
so.
room down there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick overview of schedule. This is very simplistic. We have much more detailed schedules, but generally, construction is underway. We started last fall, getting piles and kind of focusing on bridges in the Santa Fe area. We're currently working on the platform itself here in Larkspur. Construction, heavy construction will continue towards the end of the year and into the first part of next year. Testing will get way in 2019, and we're looking at moving passengers in the third quarter of 2019. Finally, Julian asked me to put a couple slides up and show you the shelters and the amenities we have on the platform. One of the things we did when we did shelter selection that we standardized throughout the system back in 2016 was give municipalities an opportunity if they didn't want to go with our base color palette, which was gloss black. Some did, some didn't, so I have a few slides to kind of show you and give you an overview on that. This is a center platform in downtown Santa Rosa. It's the gloss black treatment. We went with the standard, we call it a hip standing seam roof. Black elements, the sort of historic style of lighting fixtures.
What was the length of that platform, please?
All of our platforms are about 300 feet in length to accommodate a 3-car train.
Thank you.
The shelters are about 40 feet in length. They vary a little bit. Downtown Santa Fe, the city chose to go with sort of a terracotta finish to match the tile roofs surrounding the station. And just one more in downtown Santa Fe. I think we had a couple municipalities that chose sort of a forest green to tie into some of the surrounding elements there.
Will SMART be contacting the city about those decisions?
Yeah, I've been working with Julian on that.
I'm sure staff will reach out to me about the colors.
I think so.
I think it's going to be on your next agenda.
Terrific.
That's it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Are there any other questions or comments from council on the presentation?
I have a few.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll start from the right. Councilmember Haroff.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, how often are we going to hear the train horn going off during the day
That was my question.
in Larkspur?
Fortunately, there's no grade crossings near the station. In fact, the last grade crossing is on the San Rafael side of the hill. The only horn you will hear is when the train leaves the station. We do a single blast of the horn to let people know the train's leaving.
So that's 34 times a day?
That'd be about right during the week, yep.
Okay, and just the one toot of the horn?
Probably similar to the ferry.
I'm sorry, similar to the ferry in what respect?
Doesn't the ferry blow the horn
I think they do,
before they
yeah.
leave the
Oh, yeah.
the
Okay.
port?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay, thank you.
So, Bill, 34 bikes, or 24 bikes on average get on that, and I've been on the SMART train when there's been bikes crammed in the aisles, because there just doesn't seem to be enough bike area. Are there plans to expand the amount of capacity for bicycles? I'm particularly thinking about it because a lot of people will take their bike onto the ferry, and the ferry is already jammed with bikes. If they're coming now with the SMART train, bringing bikes also onto the ferry, I just want to see what the capacity for expanding bikes is, or is there a plan for that?
We've already started expanding for bikes. We've started running 3-car trains on certain runs that we've identified with a lot of bikes, specifically morning commute, evening commute, to just provide more capacity for everybody.
And then I think sort of my last question is for the Cal Park Tunnel, are there any changes that need to be done within there, or just open up the tunnel that has been closed, the part of the tunnel that is not the pedestrian bicycle access tunnel? Just open that up, or do you have to run track through there?
Everything we're doing is on the track side of the tunnel. We'll be building the track, of course, installing safety provisions, lighting, emergency phone, a wet standpipe for fire emergencies and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Morrison?
Yeah. So do we really need 34 trips to Larkspur? How do you calculate that? That's a lot of trips to Larkspur. Do you think we really?
You know, we're not really setting up a specific schedule, if you will, from Santa Fe to Larkspur. We're really just extending the end of the line. So the same number of trips that land in Santa Fe will land in Larkspur. It's just a continuous run the length of the line.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Chu?
What are your future plans for that last mile, getting people from the station to something where it's not really a walkable distance? Right now you're seeing a lot of bikes. Will there be shuttle services, or kind of like in the city where you can just pick up a bike and ride it somewhere?
I think all of the above. We've already worked with several of the transit providers to modify routes and make better connections for that kind of flexibility. I believe Golden Gate Transit adjusted their ferry schedule to better coincide with our schedule. Right now, the key piece in the SMART operation is the transit center in downtown Santa Fe. We try and tie to that pulse of that system where so many routes are coming and going so that people can make their connections, and that same shuttle that today gets people down to the ferry. So it's that kind of coordination with other agencies. We've explored the idea of bike sharing. It's another great opportunity as well. We've got, at most of our stations, we have a lot of space for that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
And the next presentation may touch on this, too.
Oh, no, just one more question.
Vice Mayor
How
Morrison?
early will the train arrive in Larkspur when it turns around and honks its honks a horn and leaves.
If it's similar to Santa Fe, which are our current operation, the first train out of Larkspur heading northbound in the morning would probably be around 6:30.
Okay.
Are there members of the public that would have questions or want to make comments on this presentation? Yes, ma'am. Former Mayor Joan Lundstrom.
Joan Lundstrom, former mayor, former SMART commissioner, and former TAM commissioner. Just a bit of history. Bill, in pointing out where the parking is, the very original scheme for the Larkspur station had 0 permanent parking. It was just drop off, turn around, and that was it. Larkspur had some very heated discussion with the then original CEO of SMART, and so this, to even have what they have proposed now is all to the credit of working with the Golden Gate Bridge. But it's a problem waiting to happen, as you know, at the start. The whole convergence, there's a Highway 101 convergence, ferry, and now you have train. And there's a shopping center, and there's an office center, and there are folks. So just keep saying parking, 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 because it will take years of working with folks for this solution. It was miserable from the beginning, so that they even got 30 parking spaces, I find quite miraculous, and probably they filled up, but this is your big problem and all of our big problem because of the location of everything coming together at the same point. So thanks, Bill.
Fortunately, we have a cooperative relationship between all the interests in that area, and I'm sure we can align resources and work together to find opportunities to help remedy this. Close by.
Cindy
Yes, ma'am.
Winter, Larkspur. I was looking at the pictures of the platforms, and under the roofs, I don't see anything, any walls to shelter people from those days when it is very rainy and windy, and we don't need them in the summertime, but maybe there is some temporary solution that could be installed when a big storm is expected.
Thank you for your comments. Are there other members of the public that would like to make comments or ask questions on this agenda item? Thank you, Bill. We'll look forward to more information in the future.
Mr. Mayor?
We have another presentation, but before we do that, I think we have
No, I think the
Part
mayor-
B
I
to the
think we're in the
first
same-
presentation
same-
to
we're
complete. I see our esteemed Heritage Board representative, Mr. Sink, is here.
So note for the record, we're returning to item 2.1.
Part B.
Okay.
You see,
Welcome. Thank
humbled
you.
and ashamed to not know the correct time to be here, Chair of the
Not at all.
Heritage Board. So,
Proud to have you here.
well, thank you. I'm glad to be here at last, one might say. Being a low-tech kind of guy, I just have paper, so I thought I'd show you all what we're talking about. Thank you. About to say, may I approach the bench?
The old-fashioned way.
So real briefly, we're talking about honoring Mr. Fontana for being our honoree of 2017 in connection with the Heritage Preservation for his project, the Honeymoon Cottage. I've just spared you a long history by showing you before and after pictures, which tell quite the story. I thought it appropriate also to select a couple of passages from the file about this project, which actually predates my time on the board. Briefly as follows, a letter in support of the project 3 years ago today, as follows, and I'll just take a few snippets here. We're writing to express our strong support for the current proposed renovation of 143 Madrone, which is on the verge of collapse due to the long delays in improvements. I think the pictures tell that story. We admire the current owner's resolve to invest his time and money into saving this home so that he may live in it with his family. Few would take on such a challenge, and if none did, the home surely would be lost. I can't think of a better summary than that. That's what historic preservation and heritage is all about, and without people like Mr. Fontana, we would be a poorer place, and Larkspur wouldn't have quite the charm and character that it does. So without much more ado, I want to present the plaques to our honoree, and we have brought some, we, meaning Lilia to the rescue, has brought some refreshments. As I understand, that's customary to break out a few cookies and some drink if you'll put up with that. So, Mr. Fontana, could you come up, please?
This is the way we roll in Larkspur.
Should be able to get it right this time.
Yeah. So, Heritage Preservation Award presented to Keith Fontana in recognition of outstanding restoration and renovation of the historic resource at 143 Madrone Avenue that benefits all Larkspur residents, awarded for the year 2017. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is really awesome.
I should,
I'll only be him, really.
Mr. Fontana, I should probably know this because I should have read the Heritage book before tonight. Why is it called the Honeymoon Cottage for the rest of the audience?
You know, there's a lot of different stories. I am not really 100% sure because the stories that I've heard don't really make sense.
Welcome to Larkspur.
But it has to do with something with the original owner, and then it was passed down, and I think it was either the daughter moved into it for her honeymoon or the original wife. I'm not sure.
Well,
It's your story, you can make one.
Yes.
Now, wait a minute.
Now,
There's
wait
a
a-
book on this.
I know, I should have read it.
Larkspur past and present has a few words to say about his home.
It
so,
does.
Yes. The story is in there, but not a complete story.
I don't think it explains the honeymoon.
No, it doesn't It actually
Well,
tell
thank you very much.
Here's for the outdoor.
Got some serious
Yes.
weight to it.
Thank you for
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be a part of the Larkspur community.
Nice to have you.
Is it appropriate to pass around some cookies, or are we just in?
We'd be pleased to do that. We'll recess for 10 minutes.
Great.
Let me see the plaque.
We'll reconvene at 20 past.
That's true in the Bay Area.
What are we doing to land use, right?
How's that?
That means business.
All right, we'll move to our next presentation, which is a report from the Transportation Authority of Marin on renewing the transportation sales tax in 2018. You have a packed hall for your presentation this evening.
You got a lot of cookies going on there. Good evening.
Just
Good evening.
for your information, earlier today, the Board of Directors of the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit voted unanimously to support this proposal.
Well, thank you very much. That's fantastic. And I did want to mention, I'm Diane Steinhauser, the Director of TAM. Thank you very much for allowing me to come this evening and talk briefly about, really, to hear from you on our draft proposal for renewing the sales tax. The questions we're hoping you will keep in mind as I go through this is, did we get it right? Are we missing anything? Would you add, take away? What is important to you? You want to make sure it gets accomplished. We're looking at November of 2018 and going to the ballot for the renewal, and any thoughts you have on that would be appreciated as well. So I'm going to start just very briefly I'm going to try and go through these pretty quickly. You should have a copy at your seats. There's copies back here for the audience, and this will be posted on our website. All of the presentations to the cities and towns will be posted on the website. We'll try and get that up in the next few days. Our sales tax measure has been a success. We've been able to fund things that we wouldn't have funded otherwise. In particular, our transit program and our Safe Routes program are heavily reliant on this local sales tax money. We're one of 24 counties statewide that have a transportation sales tax, 8 of 9 in the Bay Area. The only one that doesn't is Solano, not for trying. We receive additional funding by being a self-help county, which means we've helped ourselves by approving our own funding. And at Senate Bill 1, when you're thinking about that, gives us $500,000 a year, $500,000, to match our local sales tax. So the TAM board gets to decide annually how to spend that state money, which we wouldn't get otherwise if it wasn't for our own local sales tax. This diagram illustrates how important local transportation funding is. This is typical in the Bay Area, and it's typical in the state. And it's been this way for about, I'd say, 15 to 20 years or more. Federal money delivers through the gas tax about $2 million, a little less per year to Marin. And a lot of that federal money is being now attached to housing. And you'll recognize in our OBAG cycle the emphasis on priority development areas and let's reward the people that can build housing with federal money. State money is also about $2 million a year. The sales tax projected next year will deliver about $27 million. So you can see the difference with respect to the local funds and what they generate. Our existing sales tax is spent on these categories. We've been very pleased in that we've been able to tackle a lot of features of non-automotive travel. So we want to deal with congestion, but we want to deal with it by supporting transit, supporting bike and ped, supporting schools, and I'll be talking a little bit more about some of those metrics, in particular our Safe Routes program. Why renew now? Our plan is about 15 years old. So we'd like to reset it. It's not addressing the current and future transportation needs. There's things that in the 33-page original plan we're not allowed to spend money on. We're not allowed to spend money on building the connector in San Rafael, or the Narrows, or innovation, or sea level rise, resiliency, alternative fuel. None of that's allowed in the current measure. The measure was very specific to assure the public that we would spend the money the way we promised we would spend it. And so we need to reset the plan to give us some more flexibility. We've also spent all the money up till the end of the measure for several features. For example, Highway 101. All the money that we had on Highway 101 in the gap closure, it's spent. The project's built. It's opened. This is the last 3.2 miles of carpool lane through central San Rafael. So we need that future funding stream to be able to bring that money into play now, to make that money work for us now. We were here a year ago in Marin talking about increasing the sales tax. So let's do a set aside in state legislation to allow us a place within the sales tax cap for transportation. And we got a lot of pushback. So we formed an expenditure plan advisory committee last May. They met about 9-10 times between June and November, and they considered everything. They considered, they heard from all the various project sponsors in Marin. What do you need? What are you looking at as a priority? So this 24-member committee culminated their activity in November. They unanimously recommended the plan I'm going to show you tonight. They also supported going on the ballot in November of 2018 to reset the plan and do the extension so we can advance some of that highway money and do new things. They were very aware of SB1 and RM3. So SB1, road repair, takes care of local streets and roads. RM3 a handful of big projects. There's a lot of things that we need to fund with this local tax that aren't funded by SB1 and RM3. And that's what the expenditure plan committee focused on. What do we need money for locally that isn't funded by the state program or the regional program? They recognize that there is a need to fund a number of new projects and programs as soon as possible. And I think that they also recognize that extending the existing tax was a better plan than trying to increase the tax. So what is the new plan? The new plan maintains the current core structure of features. We're dealing with the details within these primary categories. It's 55% to local bus transit, 7.5% to highways and interchanges, 26.5% to local streets and roads, and then 11% to school safety. I'm going to zip through these pretty quickly. 7.5% for highways and interchanges. This may not sound like a lot of money, okay? And we've had that comment come up, especially from the business community. What are you doing for us to deal with congestion on the highways? But it's a 10% plus match to a couple of big projects that we're trying to accomplish. To finish the carpool lane in the Marin-Sonoma Narrows, so 3 lanes all the way between here, between northern Novato and northern Petaluma. And it serves as a match for the connector in San Rafael. Now, I have to admit, I am struggling to find funds to finish designing, clearing the right-of-way, and getting the permits for the Narrows. We're applying for funds, but they're only available as capital. So I'm not coming to the head of the line when it comes to getting funds for the Narrows. I need this little bit of money to finish that design and get the right-of-way utilities done so we can finish that carpool lane. The connector, which is included in Regional Measure 3, which you'll have a chance to vote on June 5th, has a substantial amount of money. But again, there's a lot of projects in that Regional Measure 3. Not everybody's going to get their money. It's a 30-year measure right up front. I need a little money to get going with design, to get going with community input, to look at local features that we'd like to include, and to take care of any cost fluctuations in that project. So I need this money to leverage the bigger funds in both the state program and the toll program. This is an example of what leveraging can do. So these last 2 projects, segment 3 and 4 in San Rafael, the gap closure, totaled well over $100 million. We had $25 million in the sales tax. But that $25 million enabled me to go to the other partner agencies and say, hey, I've got my $5 million, I need 10 from you. And it worked great. We were able to leverage over $50 million in funding to finish the gap closure because we had a little bit of our own. This is the kind of messaging that the regional agencies, MTC, the state, the CTC, they appreciate. You bring a little of your own money to the table. It helps them get to where they need to get to award you the remainder of the funds. We have a new category in the sales tax plan called interchanges. Included in our interchange listing is improvements at Tamalpais Drive, Paradise Drive. I'm also going to be talking in a few minutes about Drake. There's money that we are going to, will remain to do the improvements on Drake from 101 to the Ross town limits. And as you know, thanks to the great work of your public works staff, we're improving Drake right now. With some sales tax money from the current measure between 101 and San Quentin. So that work's underway and should be completed in the next month or 2. So we're going to be able to retain funding on Drake, and we're going to have a small category of funds to do the planning and get all the prep work done to make our interchanges shelf ready for other fund sources. Local streets and roads, let me just jump real quickly. As I mentioned, we're going to complete major road projects that are already underway, including the county's Sir Francis Drake project from 101 to the Ross town limits. As well, we're going to increase the money that we give to local jurisdictions for your discretion. I'm pleased to report that we are currently giving you about $125,000 a year. It'll jump up to $210,000. I also want to thank you and congratulate you on the own work you've done to raise revenue for infrastructure in Larkspur. Thank you for that. I'm also very happy to mention that we have a complete streets policy for the use of these funds. And from the beginning of our program in 2006 through last summer, 2017, so a little over 11 years, we have seen about 50% of these local street and road funds spent on bike, ped, and transit upgrades. So the complete streets policy is working. And, you know, I got to say, 15 years ago when I came here, it was difficult to ensure that all modes were addressed in a road project. And now it's kind of a way of life. And I think all of your public works folks are to be congratulated for thinking of the needs of everyone when they're out working on a project. Safe routes to school. Our 2016 evaluation report with respect to the schools that are involved in this program, which I think is about, how many schools? About 63, 62 or 63 countywide. 50% of the trips to and from school are green trips, and that is phenomenal. We're increasing safe routes to school funding, all three categories. One is pathway projects, two is crossing guards, and three is education and encouragement. So we completed our major road program under the first measure. We're taking the money that was freed up now, and we're redistributing it, and this is one of the things we're redistributing it to. We're going to face cuts of about 28 crossing guards next fall. If we can get this to the ballot and the public approves it, we won't have to cut any crossing guards. We can actually grow the crossing guard program because we're able to move the money around. Right now, that dollar amount is locked in the current measure, so this would give us some flexibility to keep crossing guards. You have 7 crossing guards in the Larkspur Corte Madera area, and there you can see some of the schools that are involved in the program. We've been able to fund a number of key projects in Larkspur with our Safe Pathway program. I'm going to introduce the General Manager for Marin Transit, Nancy Whelan. She's here to talk about the funding that will go to local transit.
Diane, would you prefer questions from the council to be held till the end, or?
Keep them in mind. Whatever your pleasure is.
Okay, is there anything urgent that the council would like to ask Diane before Nancy speaks?
No, I've written them down.
Okay, we'll keep track. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Hilmer and council members. I'm Nancy Whelan, General Manager at Marin Transit. We are your local transit service provider. We operate a variety of services, including the local fixed route service. We operate Muir Woods Shuttle. We operate the West Marin Stagecoach. We operate some school routes, as well as we've just begun doing some management of yellow bus services. And so I want to start with just a quick overview of kind of what we do, and then talk more specifically about what we do here in Larkspur. Since the passage of Measure A in 2004, we've been able to expand service by 125% due to some good management, but also just having that amount of money available to us, that 55%. We were facing significant cutbacks, which we obviously were able to avoid, and then continue to expand all of our key transit programs, particularly those serving seniors and disabled people, schools, as well as some of the rural areas of the county. Our operating budget is up here in this donut chart. It's about $33 million is our annual operating budget for this fiscal year. And of that, 41% of our revenues come from Measure A. So that 55% Measure A sales tax translates to 41% of our overall operating budget. And similar to what Diane said about leveraging funds, if we, with the investment of Measure A, if we didn't have Measure A, I should say, we would lose more than 41% of our service because we would have other monies not available to us because we can match them, as well as the fact that, of course, we would lose fair revenue by having to cut service. So we've estimated it could be as much as 60% of the local transit service would be cut if we did not renew Measure A. So we're very dependent on it. Now let me briefly highlight some of the services we provide in and around Larkspur. The largest share of our service is fixed route service, the local fixed route service. At the Lucky Drive bus pad on 101, north-south service is provided every 15 minutes all day, 5 days a week. And so that's probably, it's a great service in terms of corridor level service. You can get to Novato or Sausalito on Marin Transit routes from this bus pad or into San Francisco or Sonoma using the regional services provided by Golden Gate. You all know this, but because Larkspur is at the crossroads of the busiest transportation corridors in the county, Highway 101 and Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, you see a lot of the county's traffic, but you also benefit from the broader transit services provided. So you have a lot of through traffic going through, but you're also getting through transit trips. So you're seeing a benefit of that as well. Within Larkspur directly, we Marin Transit carry about 311 passengers every day on the local routes, and we know this because we count them as they get on and off. So these are people who are getting on or off at a Larkspur bus stop. And when we add the surrounding unincorporated areas of Greenbrae and Kentfield, that number jumps up to about 584 passenger trips a day, or nearly 6% of all the local transit trips that are taken in the county. And that doesn't include the hundreds of trips that are taken on Golden Gate fixed route services into San Francisco or to Sonoma. So you can imagine if all of those trips were taken on in single occupant vehicles, we'd have even more congestion, hard to believe, but even more traffic than we have today. Nearly 25% of all of our riders are under the age of 18, and we offer transit routes that are scheduled to meet the bell times of schools, as well as a discounted youth pass program. And as I mentioned more recently, we've added management of some yellow bus service to our program. The schools in and around Larkspur and Corte Madera have strong bus ridership, and in fact the buses to Redwood High, you probably know this, are experiencing overcrowding. This year, just recently in fact, our board authorized the purchase of 2 more buses to help relieve some of that overcrowding, and we hope to focus that on Redwood High School in the fall. In this last year, or the current year I should say, that we're in, school year, we assisted transitioning the Route 117 that serves Cove School to a yellow bus program, and we did that as a means to put the younger children on a more appropriate bus style and type of service, and it was a joint effort between the Joint Powers Authority in Tiburon, Belvedere, Reed, that they've formed with the town of Corte Madera and the Cove School. So each of those entities is actually contributing funding to that program, as well as paying for the bus passes. Of course, the parents are paying for the bus passes for that service. And you can see that the Cove School has about 126 one-way passes that were sold this year. It's a pretty full bus. The Youth Pass allows for unlimited travel on Marin Transit services and costs about $325 a year. That's a discount. And of the 230 passes that were distributed to Cove, Neil Cummins, Hall, and Redwood students, 47% were distributed to income-qualified students for free. So those students can now ride any of our services, any of our fixed route services locally. Under the proposed renewal of Measure A, one of the things that is changing is that school service is called out as a separate expenditure requirement. So unlike the current measure where investments in school, the ones that I've just described, were really at the discretion of Marin Transit and TAM, there's now a requirement, excuse me, that 5% of the revenues be spent on school transportation. And lastly, let me just talk a little bit about our aging population in Marin County, which I'm sure you're well aware of. As our population ages, people are needing a variety of ways to get around that are convenient, cost-effective, and preferably don't involve driving. And some of the transit options for seniors will become even more important as these people all of our population is aging. To help meet those needs, we provide a range of services under what we call Marin Access. So you've probably seen some of the smaller vans around that are operated by whistle-stop wheels for us, and that's our paratransit service, our ADA complementary paratransit service, which is required by federal law. And we've had more than 8,700 paratransit trips provided in Larkspur last year. Again, we count those specifically. You may note also on the slide we have 161 of the Larkspur residents are registered as paratransit or Marin Access customers. We also have a taxi subsidy program called Catch a Ride, where we have same-day rides provided to seniors and people who are paratransit eligible, and those are subsidized. And we had 2,000 passenger trips in Larkspur this last year. And lastly, we provide information, enrollment, counseling, and referrals on transportation for Marin seniors and people with disabilities through what we call our travel navigators, which is a kind of a one-stop shop for a variety of transportation information. And all of these services are dependent, of course, in whole or in part on Measure A, and in particular, we'll be able to continue the senior services at the 9% level that they've been funded so far, plus an additional 0.5%. Again, the EPAC, or the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee, recommended that that be increased a bit, so we'll be able to do that. And then our goal is to try to retain all of the other services that I've presented to you tonight under the renewal. So with that, I'll hand it back to Diane.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Nancy from the council? Would you mind, or do you want to wait until the end? We agreed already. We're going to wait.
Okay.
Sorry.
You know,
It's past my bedtime.
2 more slides. I just want to make sure you're aware of the poll. So the Expenditure Plan Committee developed the expenditure plan. We went out and tested it with the public. We did a poll of 794 likely voters in November of 2018. We tested features of the measure. You should all have a copy of the entire top-line report. We tested features of the measure. You can see reducing traffic congestion, fixing potholes, improving intersections, better signal timing, the top vote getters, very similar to the poll we took last May. Lower down on the list, but also covered within this expenditure plan, pedestrian pathways, crossing guards, gaps in bike paths, and incentives for electric vehicle use. Those were kind of the lower vote getters. We read a 75-word ballot argument. We got a 77.9% approval, both definitely yes and probably yes. And then we read 9 opposition statements, which our pollster was astounded. We were asking so many opposition questions in terms of increased state fees and gas taxes, increased tolls, the risk of not being able to deduct your taxes under the new federal tax law, other things being on the ballot, and we dropped to 73.2%. Still very strong in terms of a starting point. Our next steps is to hear from you. What else would you like to see addressed? I did also want to mention there's many things that we didn't touch on in this presentation. We have funds now for a very small pot of funds for innovation. We have a very small pot of funds for sea level rise and resiliency. We have TDM, which is helping employees get to and from where their employees need to go. That TDM program, by the way, will help us fund things like our LIFT program, which gives people rides to and from SMART. I just want to make sure I mention for the record, that program is in effect, and we're hoping to continue it into next fall. You can download the LIFT app, enter the coupon code GetSmart17, and TAM is funding $5 off of your LIFT trip. No limits on how many trips you take. We're getting good response on this from people that can take SMART but need a way to get to their final mile of their trip. We're also putting in a bike share program at all the SMART stations. This may help address the bike issue on SMART trains, and we're looking at all the stations in Marin, as well as most of the stations in Sonoma. We got a $900,000 grant from MTC. So we're going to be putting that in, and probably it'll be in effect in early 2019. So we're trying to address the last mile needs of SMART, And between these funds and our vehicle registration fee program, we think we can keep funding those first and last mile options. So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you for being patient, by the way.
Thank you. But before I take questions from the council, is the council comfortable with the understanding about what tiers of projects Measure A covers versus projects addressed by things such as SB1 and RM3, which handle bigger, more extensive. I don't want you to think that this sales tax is responsible for everything spent on transportation in Larkspur.
I actually would like.
Catherine?
I understand SB1, but could you just give a little primer on the RM3?
Absolutely.
And then in relationship to that, what the bond measure, I don't even know if it's called a bond measure, that's allegedly going to be on the ballot in November for regional transportation tax?
That's going to be on the ballot in June.
In June, okay.
And that's RM3.
Oh, that's the RM3.
And let me just mention, there could be a potentially on the ballot in November, a repeal of SB1.
Yeah, I've read that.
So the opposition is gathering signatures. They're not quite there yet. They have till May 21st, but they're making substantial progress on signature gathering. So we're very nervous about SB1 being repealed in that it provides such substantial funding to local streets and roads and state highways for maintenance purposes. RM3, Marin and Sonoma pay about 6% of the tolls under RM3. We're going to get about 11% of the revenue. So it's very good for us in terms of supporting RM3. 4 major projects in Marin with 3 others that are also a benefit. It provides $135 million for the direct connector from northbound 101 to eastbound 580. So that will be built in San Rafael. That actually, thank you, Mayor Hilmer and others on the council and the prior councils, that idea came substantially from you when we were working on the Greenbrae project in 2013. And by the way, MTC is scheduled to open the 3rd lane on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge coming up. It's feeling like beginning of April now. It's gotten kind of steadily delayed, but that's right around the corner. The issue is going to be how do you get to that lane? You still have to go through traffic signals. So it'll provide money for the connector. But as I mentioned, matching funds to get us to the front of the line, to deal with local features, we need that. We need a little bit of our own money for that. RM3 also funds $30 million for a new transit center in San Rafael. Golden Gate is currently working with the City of San Rafael, Marin Transit, SMART, and TAM to look at sites. And you were right in kind of that there is no site is off the table with respect to a new transit center that will tie in bus transit with the SMART station platform and be an upgrade of what's there now.
So even the current is on the table still?
I think the current is still on the table. So that's my understanding. And then there's reuse of land that is also being folded into that discussion by the City of San Rafael. RM3 provides $120 million for the Marin-Sonoma Narrows to complete the carpool lane and bike path. Now, that's not enough for both Marin and Sonoma. We're facing about a $200 million shortfall, but we're hoping to capture some SB1 funds. But they're more likely to go to Sonoma. You may hear about that in May, that the state's giving them funds. They're ready to go, and I'm still working on that design and need this money to kind of get me closer to competing for those funds, but the RM3 money will help. And finally, there's $100 million in RM3 for Route 37. Route 37 has 2 challenges. It's got a congestion challenge, and it's got a sea level rise challenge. So there needs to be a combination of solutions to address 37. There's money for the SMART extension to Healdsburg and Windsor. That we may benefit in terms of bringing trips down into Marin on SMART. There's money for the Bay Trail, which is also an access to transit category. And there's money in RM3 for North Bay transit improvements. So our transit operators will be eligible for those funds. So that's kind of the RM3 overview.
That needs to pass.
It needs to pass. It's hard for a little county like us or Sonoma to build these mega projects with the existing sources of money that we have.
Could you briefly touch on how Marin Transit and all of these are currently working with SMART as it builds out? So we can know what, at a minimum, we can expect when
Yeah.
service starts in Larkspur.
Well, I'm going to let Nancy, but I mentioned our LIFT program, which we want to make sure we bring a lot of good marketing on that as you're getting ready to open your station. And our bike share program, which may be in effect at the same time for those that can use it. I'll let Nancy talk a little bit as well.
And did you see Lyft just announced a brand-new project of bringing seniors to their medical care appointments for free?
Yeah. Bravo.
I have an inside scoop on that.
So the way that we're coordinating, sorry, I heard what you said, that's great. So we're coordinating with SMART in terms of trying to serve the stations with local transit services. I think it's easiest for me to start with San Rafael Transit Center, because Bill already touched on it earlier, that we operate on a pulse there, and that means that almost all of our routes, not all of our school routes, but all of our other routes go through the San Rafael Transit Center, and they are based on that pulse, which means that our buses leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, for example. The SMART train comes in about 4 or 5 minutes before that. So SMART arranged its entire operation around that pulse, which has been terrific for us. So people can get a lot of different places when you're in San Rafael. Some of our other stations, to give you some examples, we've helped with some coordination with an employer shuttle at Civic Center. And right now, our board, in fact, next month is going to vote on a pilot project that is really the micro-transit that I think we've all been alluding to here. And our form of micro-transit is using an app that's very much like Uber and Lyft, but it's personalized for this service that we'll be rolling out, that has vans that are a little bit smaller. And they're also wheelchair equipped, which has actually been our challenge when we look at Uber and Lyft. They don't tend to have the wheelchair accessible vehicles that are needed to make us compliant with what we need to be doing. So we have our own fleet of vehicles. We're having our own operators operate them, and it'll be an app and it'll be on demand. So it's on demand service, but it'll be in a very geographically constrained area, and it'll probably be around one of the SMART stations. So that's one of the things we'll be piloting, and we're following in Tam's footsteps, trying to look at what the Lyft usage has been and see what the patterns are and that sort of thing, to kind of get a better understanding of how people want to do that first last mile. So those are a couple things, and then we are trying to rearrange, as Bill mentioned. I'm kind of jumping back to fixed route transit, trying to make sure that we can serve the stations as best we can. Again, because we operate on the pulse out of San Rafael, almost all of our routes operate there. You can't have it meet all the trains everywhere. Our buses don't always have what we call a perfectly timed meet. They are just because they're meeting at that one point, then they go on their route, and they may not be able to meet that other station at a time that is a convenient transfer time. So we're trying to improve that to the extent we can.
Would current routes in the ferry area pass through the SMART platform areas? Would that be added to their route?
We currently have two local routes that serve at the 228 and the 29, and so that stop right now is on Larkspur Landing Drive, right in front of Larkspur Landing Circle, right in front of the theater, or almost not right in front of the theater, but on the theater there. So that's the current stop. We can't. I think there was some thinking that we could go up that hill that Bill was describing into that parking area potentially. Small vehicle maybe, but I think we're better off passengers letting them just walk down to that stop.
Yeah, I think we just want to make sure we understand what to tell people.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll need to do that, and then we'll need to understand where they're going, because I'm not sure how well the routes will be serving them. So we'll get a better sense of that, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Way.
How do you imagine this plan, the updated plan, will recognize advancing technologies in transportation, such as driverless cars and other car-sharing technologies?
Sure. Diane can talk about that, and I'm just going to add in that it's coming to buses as well.
Right.
So yeah, we're looking forward to it, waiting for it, hoping for it. But I think before that, you're seeing a lot of the technology changes in terms of just, the app usage and information to passengers, and we're trying to keep up with that and provide as good information as we can. Things like, when is my next bus and all that.
So in one of the questions in the memo was what type of information would we need in the future to support the plan? And I think it goes to that question that data collection from, would be helpful for me about as you increase ride-sharing use and these mobile vans and at on-demand ride-sharing and things like that, there is a lot of evidence that that actually increases congestion pretty dramatically in certain geographic areas. So that would be interesting data that I would like to see if you're looking in the future for how you're collecting your intensities of usership, because as you add more types of vehicles and uses, there may be effects. The other thing, as far as in reference to the school world, I think we all know here in Larkspur, traffic is completely different in the summer when the school utilization, because we have 8 schools within this narrow area. So I'm pleased about that. I'd love to see more data as you enhance the school ridership program, as you're talking about enhancing that, how many students are actually beginning to, the increases in student ridership. And then actually where they come from, because I think that would help us. I don't know if that's too much data to collect, but
We're very data intensive.
I know you guys
data.
are. So, and then my last actual question about, particularly in the transportation entity that you represent, is we used to have a shuttle, I don't remember the number, and it went around sort of the Twin Cities. And it was free, and it went sort of down Tamalpais, and then it went across.
Wave. Wasn't it called the Wave?
Was it? The Wave goes out to Fairfax now from the shuttle.
That was the Twin City Shuttle.
The
It was
Twin City Shuttle.
222 or something like that.
222,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Are
because,
you-
yeah, Melissa and I put that together way back when.
But it's gone now. Is this plan contemplate any of those very specific shuttle loops?
We don't have a specific plan for expanding any of our shuttle routes at this time. I think you're right, with SMART coming on board, we look at, again, at the 228. 228 was the most recent addition that we've made to try to address some of those low-density areas, particularly the South Alicio and that sort of thing. We will look at it again, we always do. I think we're trying to see how some of the microtransit works and see if that might not be a better fit. But we also agree with you 100%. We don't want to send vans around or have on-demand services that are one passenger. We're very much needing, it's a pooled concept, very much a shared ride concept. So I think we'll have to see how some of that works out. But yes, I think we're going to continue to look at how we can do low-density transit to some of these areas.
Vice Mayor Morrison.
Thank you. At the last Safe Routes to School meeting we had, you had a representative there, and she said she's going to increase the buses. Is that happening soon? The bus routes?
Yeah, we're trying to do that, particularly to relieve the overcrowding, because we literally have students who who show up for the bus and can't get on. And so those routes tend to be the ones serving Redwood High School, and we did just order 2 new buses. We were able to do that in part because of the passive SB1, so we have a little bit of money here that we can use for purchase of those, and we're hoping to, those are long lead items, and we just purchased them, so we won't get them delivered until, I think, just after school begins, but we're going to try to.
That's exciting.
The
That's
fall.
great
Yeah,
news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do.
And then the yellow bus. So are you thinking about bringing the yellow bus to Larkspur?
Well, right now, we don't have a plan for bringing any additional service to Larkspur, other than the Cove School that's being served currently. That's pretty much it. We have a county-wide plan for Yellow Bus, and we have listed in there all of the, what we call high and medium demand schools. So we basically looked at schools, and the ones that tend to look most promising for Yellow Bus service are those where the students live outside of the walking and biking distance, but not too far, because if they live really far, we can't get a bus, it takes too long. And so right now, Larkspur doesn't have any other schools other than the Cove that we've already identified, so that's pretty much.
And you charge $625 for the whole school year, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do people find that awfully expensive?
There is still a program to subsidize those who are on free and reduced lunch, so there is a program for that. So that accommodates some students, some families, and others, yes, sometimes it is a big challenge, especially
just
for
sounds like a lot of
multiple
money.
kids. Yeah, multiple kids, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
If I may, I'd like to jump back to the innovation question, but I'd also like to mention that we're renewing the tax. It was very difficult for this 24-member expenditure plan committee to fit everything in. But we did identify within the local street and road pool of funds, 1% for projects and programs to address sea level rise. Is it enough? Ultimately, probably not. But it's a starting point. We also identified 0.5% for innovation, and we've actually begun a series of, I'll call them charrettes, with public works and planning staff around the county. What would you like to see in terms of innovation? Things like signal interconnection and smart roads is very doable, but we're looking at even more innovation with respect to an autonomous vehicle pilot. We're hoping that little bit of money will bring in private funds, and we're working closely with our innovation workshop. We're having another one on June 8th, mark your calendars, to keep attracting interest in Marin for that. The other thing I wanted to mention is our local street and road funds. We're making sure those funds are eligible for new technologies, but that is going to become a local decision as to what you might want to implement there. But we were able to eke out a little bit of funding. The last thing I want to make sure I mention is that the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee and the TAM Board both recognize that things are changing. And, transportation, transit may not be what it is now in 10 years. So they would like this plan to be revisited no later than 10 years with a broad public input process and a supermajority approval of the councils and citizens in Marin without necessarily going to a vote. So we're looking at a 10-year plan. That could be lowered. We could do that even sooner to see if we should reset the funding even more. But we are trying to squeeze as much as we can into the existing framework without damaging those program elements that are reliant on these funds, like transit and safe routes, particularly.
Thank you. Are there questions of Diane from the council? Councilmember Chu and then Councilmember Hara. And then
You had
Councilmember
mentioned
White.
earlier you had something like 7 or 9 different items you asked respondents where you were looking at the negative side of it.
Correct.
Yeah, and you had mentioned the tax law changes in 2018.
Correct.
Okay, I won't get into any of the details right now, we can talk about it, but that's actually a false argument.
You know, we wrote this in December. It was right when Congress was developing the tax law and took the poll out in the second week of January. So I would love to understand more detail. We put it in because we felt it was things people may be concerned about. And we wanted to register how much concern they had with respect to this renewal. But thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, in short, if a person is disqualified because of the cap for deducting sales tax, there are at least 2 other things that would have disqualified them a lot sooner. So the sensitivity of sales tax and the large threshold for being able to deduct it is not something that I can expect a lot of people to hit, and if they do, it'd be a very unique circumstance.
Well, thank you for that information. We'll so note that in our future discussions.
Councilmember Hara.
Yeah, just again, coming back to questions I had earlier about smart on electric vehicle infrastructure.
Right.
I don't see any mention of funding for electric vehicle infrastructure in your presentation. Where do you get dollars for that? And
Well,
what are your plans?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question, because I know you might have some speakers that are going to mention that as well. The current expenditure plan for the sales tax does not have specific funding dedicated to electric vehicle infrastructure. However, our vehicle registration fee program has funding dedicated to electric vehicles. And in fact, we're looking at, right now in the current year, We have approximately 240,000. We're probably going to end up at 260,000 with expenditures on electric vehicle infrastructure. We're hoping to do some strategic planning in the next few months about what more should we be doing with electric vehicles. And, you know, we're looking for your input. If this is important to councils, we need to bring that back to the TAM board, and the TAM board's going to have to figure out how to rearrange the pieces in order to provide more funds. But we want to make sure we get out with some good education on what we can do now with electric vehicles, with the funding that we have. We've been able to leverage grants with the VRF funds, and we've accomplished quite a bit in the last few years.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
There is a significant need for funding to bolster and expand the electric vehicle infrastructure within Marin County, here in Larkspur and elsewhere. So I was actually a little disappointed to see it not mentioned in the context of your sales tax request. Lots of other things are. There's no mention of that. And, you know, given the importance of electric vehicles to achieving the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals and other commitments, potential partnerships with MCE, for example.
Correct.
I really would encourage the TAM and the TAM board to take another look at that and see if there is room for additional funding to support that infrastructure.
We'd be glad to carry that message back.
Thank you.
I have a comment, and this is, you may have heard this from me before. I know that there is a benefit to presenting all these funding measures separately. Measure A versus RM3 versus SB1 versus, because it's too scary otherwise if you were to look at everything together and just what we're asking. But at the same time, to show that there's a bigger picture of plans and improvements that are covering things not covered by these individual things. Because the questions come up each time you see one of these tax measures, it's unclear what it covers and what it doesn't cover. So I would imagine, if I don't have a solution, but I imagine some kind of graphic diagram that accompanies all of these subsets that refers back to a bigger geography of everything, that when a question comes, you can refer to that geographical reference and say, well, that's not covered in this, but it is covered over here. And we'll, you know, it's just so that the conversation can reference a comprehensive approach.
That is a great suggestion.
I think there's charts that do that.
We would be glad to try and develop something like that. Over the course of our 9 meetings with the Expenditure Plan Committee, they heard about this every meeting and the progress of SB1 and RM3, and they got it, they understood it. But representing it is something in terms of education that we're trying to do, and that's a good suggestion in tackling that even better.
Well, I just think that these individual measures mean more because they represent what they all do together. Mm-hmm. Although I understand from a political perspective, presenting them in bite-sized digestible pieces would make the most sense to the electorate. But in Marin, for example, all of these things are so interdependent to think that these things could be pitted against each other, or one supported and another not supported, is a misunderstanding, because they all have different emphasis.
Yeah, let me say this. I wouldn't be here recommending an extension if we didn't have SB1. The Public Works Departments, they didn't like 26.5%, even with SB1. But they recognized in their presentations and discussions with my Expenditure Plan Committee that we're doing a renewal, and this is the best we can do. We're trying to fit a lot of things into this. in this 15-year reset. So that's one. The second is, if you look at the mega projects that we're facing, and even with our $25 million a year that we're collecting from the measure, if you consider the connector and the Narrows and the transit center, it would take up most of the funding. So we wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have ARM 3. So they're interdependent, and it really has freed us to look at an extension rather than an increase in trying to rework how we should be leveraging these other things. How do we match these other things and make them work? So I'm very pleased to be here with strong public support for the renewal. And I think we can consider small changes, and the board will absolutely listen to the advice that's coming from you. And so I appreciate what advice you've given, but this has all enabled us to do this, really.
Well, what you just described may be why at the SMART board today, their action specifically was to support the sales tax measure and then work to oppose any opposition to SB1 in the same action.
Bravo.
Any questions of Diane?
Yeah, I still have
Catherine?
a few. You answered many of them. I wrote down some during your second return to the podium, so I appreciate that. I'd like to echo Kevin's interest in electric vehicles. I watched today as Tesla drove out its first big rig, a completely electric big rig, which is an amazing feat. And it's just about to spring at us even bigger. So, but that'll be decisions made later on. I appreciate your highways and interchanges segment that was added to it. And you did mention the 2013 Greenbrae interchange conversations that had gone on and workshops. And one of the things that stuck out with me during that attending those workshops was the elaborate braiding of interchanges that we have within our little corridor here. 5, I think, that braid on and off within that short amount of time. Is any conversation opening up about that with this? Or did I just like throw a hot potato into a burning fire pit? Right, or you can take the Fifth Amendment.
I'll take a little bit of the Fifth.
Okay.
But the Expenditure Plan Committee recognized the importance of, east-west access onto 101. And really, the book is open here. I mean, we've got a little pot of money to start studying, to get some things shelf-ready. And so I would come back to you and the town of Corte Madera and say, you guys had some tolerance problems with that old design. You want to come back and look at certain features? We'd be glad to revisit that with you.
I think
But
Tam Ridge settled all that for us.
We still have the safety issue that still is there, so. Okay. But my last question is, sea level rise is bigger than I think any of us recognize, and Highway 37 was an example of closure, how many days this last year, weeks at a time it was closed. So sea level rise in our area, I'm just thinking Larkspur, although we need to think globally, regionally too. Lucky Drive exit becomes more and more underwater as has water intrusion to it because sea level's rising and storms and everything. Are you contemplating any changes to that drainage area or raising that pathway?
The work by Baywave and Seasmart, Bayside and Oceanside, to look at what the vulnerabilities are and what are some of the possible solutions is terrific. And so now we have a lot of knowledge about where problems could occur. And I know that where you're talking is included in that view. How do you implement changes is a very, very difficult topic right now. Who should be responsible? How do we do this? What should we tackle first? These are some of the questions that I think all asset managers and local jurisdictions are facing. The tiny bit of money we have, and maybe this needs to grow in the future, will kind of help us leverage planning and some of the development of solutions. I also know that Resilient by Design, which is the big effort that is happening regionally, is looking at this area also. So I remember in past years conversations regionally about some state funding to help us tackle this. The Bay Area is extremely vulnerable in how waterbound we are. So the conversations are going on, and I think what we can do is keep the planning going, and with the tiny bit of money we're able to identify through this measure, actually get some solutions developed so that then we can possibly build them. So,
Thank you.
To answer your question, Lucky Drive is not proposed to be raised at this time at 101.
Thank you very much. I forgot that, mentioning that specifically.
Other questions of Diane?
Yeah.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, sure. And
Are there members of the public that have questions
Yeah.
for Diane?
Cindy Winter, I have a few tidbits to add. As I said last week, the AV age, autonomous vehicle age, draws near. Several have been sighted recently at Marin Country Mart and on East Sir Francis Drake. The little shuttles under long testing at Concord Naval Weapons Station and the adjacent Bishop Ranch will soon be released from their confines and onto the public streets by grace of the state of California and its more liberal rules. They're ready to be on the public streets. They've been chafing to get out of prison. I'm hoping that sometime we can bring a shuttle to Marin, to a safe place, to demonstrate in tranquility how these little vehicles will work and reassure the skeptics. Now, Councilmember Way spoke highly of Lyft for taking people to the doctor's offices, and that is indeed very good, and Uber made the same declaration within maybe 24 hours. People think there's a coincidence that about 10 days ago, Uber and Lyft were sued because so few of their vehicles have chair lifts or wheelchair accessible features. And they don't want to do that. They don't want to have their drivers helping people on and off because they want to get rid of their drivers. They're hemorrhaging money. And as soon as they can get fully autonomous, then they think they will be making lots of money. Palo Alto, however, got a grant from MTC. And this is to help devise a wheelchair lift for shuttles and other features that will help the disabled, because there's a veterans hospital in Palo Alto, and apparently some of these patients will come on the train. And when they get off the train, Palo Alto would like them to be able to get to the hospital. So there's cutthroat competition going on, and it's quite fascinating. And I am all in favor of working closely with Marin Transit and Golden Gate Transit, because the more I read about what's going to happen, probably nobody knows for sure, we need to be in good partnership with them. And Marin Transit has the advantage, too, that they are a friendly system. They want to help people. And if the Ubers and Lyfts of the world want to leave the disabled to their own devices, I think we're lucky to have Marin Transit. So that's about all I can say right now, but stay tuned.
Thank you for your comments. Other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council folks. My name's April Dean. I'm a 30-year resident of Larkspur, an engineer by profession, and a member of the board of directors of Cool the Earth, which is a small local nonprofit. Over the last 10 years, our organization, Cool the Earth, has inspired over about 40,000 families in the county to reduce their carbon footprint. And our current focus is advocating for the electrification of transportation in the county through a campaign called Drive Clean Marin. So over half of Marin's greenhouse gas emissions come from internal combustion passenger vehicles. That's over half of our emissions. So to have any meaningful impact on carbon emissions, we have to aggressively address electrifying our transportation sector. And we can do this by increasing the adoption of EVs or electric vehicles within the county and provide a charging infrastructure for those vehicles. And this infrastructure is particularly important for folks who live in rental properties, which comprise almost 40% of the population of Marin, because these folks don't have access to home charging. So when we voted on Measure A back in 2004, there were no EVs being produced at that time, but a lot has changed in 14 years. And now there are now many options for electric vehicles and many, many more on the way, as I'm sure you've all read about. But this proposal, as you brought up, and I appreciate your bringing that up, does not allocate $1 for any EV infrastructure or to facilitate the transition to a future that's predominated by electric vehicles. So we know that Marin residents care very deeply about climate change. I think we're all aware of that. Yet these incentives that are listed in the poll that was presented in the TAM survey, it polls very low. So why is this? With less than 3% of Marinites driving EVs, it seems clear the public does not have knowledge of what's needed to make the conversion to driving to EVs, nor do they fully understand all the impacts of driving internal combustion engine cars. I think if the survey question had been written with context about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the polling might look quite different. And basing a 30-year decision we're making with this tax with an uninformed public is just not okay. So with this measure, we're making critical decisions here for our kids and our grandkids. My son goes to Redwood High. He's going to be 47 when this measure expires. What will the health of our community and our planet look like in 30 years if we don't do anything to significantly draw down our emissions now? So we have an opportunity to advance a really practical solution to our county's carbon footprint by transforming our transportation sector. We have to go electric, and TAM's Measure A really must help contribute to this solution. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments. Other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll come back to the council. Are there any further questions or discussion by the council on this presentation? Councilmember Harrell.
Just again to reemphasize that the speaker's last point and the comments that were made up here. It's fairly well recognized that the biggest single impediment to more broadly distributed use of electric vehicles is the lack of charging infrastructure. The Teslas of the world, they can make their cars, but nobody's going to buy them if they can't plug them in. So I really want to applaud the last speaker's observations on that issue. I think it's very important that our transportation managers within this county assign a high priority to moving us forward on this infrastructure for the future of our community and our children.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diane. It's been very informative. Thank you, Nancy. Thank all the TAM staff for their work on this. Very much appreciated. So that, we have no public hearings. We have,
Public comment.
Well, we're going to move to public comment. Are there members of the public that would like to make comments this evening on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. Are there items on the consent calendar the council would like to remove for further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adoption.
I'll move adoption.
And I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second on the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. City manager's oral report.
3 items for you this evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. First, remind the council and the public that starting today, the crosswalk at Sir Francis Drake and Larkspur Landing that connects the intersection at the opening to the ferry parking lot is closed, and that's to facilitate the work that we've been doing on Sir Francis Drake. It could be closed as long as 6 weeks, depending on how the construction project goes.
It's just a crosswalk.
Just a crosswalk.
Yeah.
And so pedestrians need to be aware that they're being directed to either of the 2 overcrossings over Sir Francis Drake, either the Central Marin Ferry Connector or the Marin Country Mart connection. So we appreciate everybody's patience with that project.
Dan, in reference to that, I was on the ferry the other day, and the ferry announced that the intersection was being closed. And then they got a lot of questions from passengers to the ferry people who manage the ferry. Are we communicating with the ferry employees?
No, we don't communicate directly with ferry
Okay.
employees. We communicate with the ferry district, and then I can't speak for exactly how they communicate to their individual employees.
I just wondered if they're kept in the loop, because a lot of people came up and asked questions, and anyway. Okay.
And then 2 other items. One is want to remind the public that we are seeking applications of interest for the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure B. And those are due in City Hall by March 22nd. And there's a link on our homepage to guide somebody to the application process, or they can call the city clerk, Jamie Carilla, for information. And then lastly, we expect to announce details here within the next week of an April workshop to unveil our preliminary 5-year plan for our road maintenance program. So I want to encourage the folks to be on the lookout on our website and in our email blasts for when we announce those details. But we expect that workshop to be in early April. So that'll turn it back to the mayor and the council members.
Thank you very much. Questions of the city manager on his oral report? Moving to council members' oral reports and comments. Item 6.1 is a report from the February 27th and March 6th meetings of the General Plan Update Steering Committee.
So Councilmember Haroff and myself are our representatives to the General Plan Update Committee, and also Daniel Kunstler and Monty Dignan are from the Planning Commission. So the 4 of us. The first meeting, we've had 2 meetings. The first was on February 27th, which was an introductory meeting about the process, and Neil Toft introduced how this was going to work throughout the course of the summer. And the schedule of meetings is all online, and all of the documents are all online. He's working with Shannon to make sure that they're out there in a timely manner, including all the supporting documents, so it's available to people. So I think the first meeting, we just did an introduction about the process. The second meeting we had, which was just this Tuesday, which was the first of the elements that we're looking at, which is land use. And I thought we had a very robust conversation about the land use policy issues, going through some of the edits that had already been done by the Community Advisory Committee, which I think met 10 years ago. Was it that long ago? Maybe a little less than that.
2011.
Yeah. So we went through some of the things that have definitely changed since then, and then really I felt had a pretty good conversation about other issues that we would like to explore further about our land use. And these meetings are posted online, and they will be twice a month until June. Coming up is a workshop. Yeah, so the next one is a workshop, I think, which is a little bit more of an open format, but anybody can come and participate in these conversations. We had about an audience of 4 or 5, but they were able to make contributions about some ideas they had too. So
Propose a change, they'll show up.
Anything else that you thought was?
No, that covers it pretty well for the general plan. I just want to express my appreciation. Neil's not here, but our planning director, Neil Toft, who's leading us through this process. This is a very challenging process. It's been a long time in coming. And I want to just express my public appreciation for his work in moving us forward on this. We have a lot of work still to do. This is a line-by-line revisit to the general plan. So making that happen takes a lot of work, not only on his part, but on the part of the committee members that are participating in the process as well.
I'd like to echo that too, that I was very pleased that there was a lot of preliminary work already done by Neil and his team and the staff, because many of the changes in state law and in changes that we have had done in our jurisdiction in the last 8 years were already identified in the document. So we already got, I think, revisions that were substantially accurate as far as what's been taking place, for instance, with the addition of Smart Train, the removal of the Marin Airport terminus there. A lot of different land use things have taken place in the last 5 to 8 years, which were already identified in there, which I felt indicated they'd done a lot of work already. So, yeah.
I just want to say thank you both for taking on this task. It is daunting.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I could clarify at one point, the committee has a March 20 meeting that's actually a committee meeting to discuss optional elements, specifically, I think, economic development and sustainability. And the public certainly welcome that, but that, as the council members have said, that's a structured committee meeting where they really try to move through the material. The workshop, the first workshop that was alluded to is Tuesday, April 3rd.
Okay.
It's at 6:30 at Central Wind Police Authority's community room, and we encourage the public to come. The purpose of the workshop is really to tackle some of the topics that have never been addressed before that are going to need to be captured for this process. And so this one's focused on sea level rise, general health and public safety issues, and noise elements, which I think are all of interest to our community. So we really encourage the public to come and be engaged in the discussions about those topics. And then the committee will return to its normal meeting schedule on April 17 to follow up on the workshop and to digest what was learned through the workshop process.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
I have
I have the advantage of the internet right here in front of me.
I have a lot of meetings on my brain,
So-
but it's all posted on the website, so thanks.
All right, thank you for that
Yep.
report. 6.2 is a report from the February 28th, 2018 meeting of the 2050 Plan Steering Committee. Councilmembers Haroff and Morris.
Ours is not as intense, is it, Kevin?
Well, it's maybe not as detailed
just as
oriented,
important.
but it's very important. in many
Kevin, do you
ways,
want
just as
to, do you want to
important.
start?
I'd be happy to. Again, this is a process that's been a little bit of time in coming. This is a revisit of our 2050 plan, which is a plan that I think is designed primarily to set priorities or to identify needs and set priorities for the city with a focus on infrastructure needs across the board for the city, both in a short term and in the long term. And we started that process. Councilmember Morrison and I are kind of on an ad hoc committee working with our city manager to move through a revisit of the 2050 plan. The first meeting that we had was on the 28th of February, I think. And in that meeting, we kind of focused on community services, infrastructure, and space needs, including the library, city hall, and other needs. We're trying to, and again, thanks to the organizational skills of our city manager and focusing our attention both on short-term needs, longer-term needs, and also the financial implications we have to address in both contexts. And I think it's a very helpful way of thinking about these issues. This is an evolving process. You know, although we're just by nature of the process, we have to start kind of piecemeal and look at one element at a time. But all of these elements have to come together at some point because, again, the process is intended to set priorities, and we can't really set priorities until we know all of the needs and all of the resources that are available to us in order to meet those needs. So it's an ongoing process, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
Yeah.
It's actually helpful to me to actually be part of that, as well as the general plan
Sounds
update
like-
process, because they do complement each other in many respects, and very educational for me personally.
That's great. We also we discussed the library, how we need to remove the books and make more room because there's so many activities happening there. So we talked about how we can maybe accomplish that. We talked about the recreation. It's on Hall School. The Hall School owns that property. So we're talking about the future. Maybe we may not have that access to the building. So that was a concern. We also talked about the Rose Garden Community Facility parcel. We talked about the master plan and how we're going to go about, maybe rearranging or just how to start the process of the discussion, bring it back to the table. We talked about City Hall, rearranging the City Hall if we ever do end up building the Larkspur. The Larkspur Library and Community Center. And we also talked about different financial consideration. Maybe we need to rediscuss it about the building. Do we go ahead and, do we do a prefabrication for the building, or do we build it in phases, or explore partnership? So there's a lot on the table right now to discuss for our future.
Ann, Kevin, who's on that committee? The two of you, and then who else?
And Dan Schwartz, and we
Well, I'm
have-
staff.
What's that?
I'm staff.
You're the
Your staff.
staff.
It's just 2 council members.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's open to the public.
We wish we had people come.
Our next meeting is at 1 o'clock on Friday, March 16th, here in the council chamber.
Yeah, it's just the two of us on the council
Yeah.
for the Brown Act
Mhm.
restriction.
Yep.
All right, thank you for that, and thank you for the work focusing on it. The next, we have no public hearings.
You might want to ask if any of the council members had other
Other
reports
council member
out.
reports?
We added this format at your direction because you wanted the opportunity to have it on the agenda when you have report outs on these committees in case council members wanted to discuss topics.
My bad. Are there other council member reports?
First time we
and
did it,
comments this
Mr.
evening?
Mayor.
I have just two.
Council, or Vice Mayor Morris.
So I sit on the Marine and Women's Commission, appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and on March the 25th, the website just went up. We have the Marin Teen Girls Conference coming up, and it's very exciting. We have every student from high school is the ambassador, and the ambassador puts on the conference, and we have 3 sessions. We have 8 different workshops per session, and our goal is to get 300 girls to come to the Embassy Suites on March the 25th, starting from 9 until 3:30, and it's $20 per student, or we do have scholarships for those who need it. So we're very excited about it. Please take a look at the website. I think you'll be as impressed as I am. I also went to the MCCMC legislation meeting, and just bills to watch. I sent you all information on these bills. The first one is SB 946. It's sidewalk vendors. AB 1775, that's the state land leasing oil and gas. AB 2132, building permit fees and waiver. Along with, we all know about the SB 828. Understand that one clearly. And then AB 1759 is the general plan, housing elements, production report, withholding of transportation funds. So I sent you all the information to have, to read further about the bills.
Thank you.
That's it.
Other council member reports. Councilmember Chu.
Just a quick update. Back on February 26th, we finally got the MCCMC Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members pension, and it's a work group studying pensions and other post-employment benefits. So the first meeting primarily was just to get us up to date. The vast majority of the people on that committee have never studied these issues before, so wanted to bring them back up to the point where the committee had completed its work the first time back in 2011. So at this point, I can say that Larkspur is well represented. We have Councilmember Haroff working with me, and also City Manager Jan Swartz, who is representative for the Marin Managers Association. This is a topic that is of interest to all the council members, and, it's real difficult to get everybody there because of quorum issues. So we're going to be posting, all our meeting materials on the MCCMC website in the committee section, and just click on the pension OPEB tab.
Great, thank you for doing that.
I have one item regarding CMSA and the ultimate, the process of deciding whether Larkspur should remain as a member. I would suggest that we agendize this so that I can talk about an issue that's come up regarding the permitting for CMSA and how that permitting now has joined the member agencies into the liabilities and exposure for that. I want to make sure that I inform the council of all the information regarding that and how we should go about making the decision to stay or not. Because I think there's more to this now than I had originally thought.
Would you like that on the next agenda?
You and I can talk. I just want to point out to the council, I think they should come back. There's a bit more complexity of this now that has to do with regional permitting. That is, because of the way that the permit for Marin has been negotiated, the collection agencies now are part to the responsible for the permit in ways that expose the member agencies in ways that they haven't been before. And I want to make sure that we're not walking into something that, because we don't have the city doesn't own the collection system.
In reference to that, how many collection agencies do we have in Marin? Are there just two? That we have in our regional area?
Well, in our JPA.
The JPA has 4 collection agencies that
collection,
are
okay.
members, but there's quite a few more within the county.
But within this general area, the 4 in the JPA are?
The subsidiary districts for Corte Madera and San Rafael, and then the Ross Valley Sanitary District. And is it Las Colinas is the 4th in the CMSA?
It's Ross Valley, Sand District
I feel like
1
I'm
and
leaving.
2.
No, it's just the 3.
It's just the 3.
Yeah, I apologize. 3 members. Yeah.
So if this does, I'd like a little of that background if we're going to have this on the agenda. So
Well,
just so I know what they are.
I wasn't describing it very clearly. The permitting is based on the
Probably it's
water
reaching a
quality
level of
issues.
detail
Yeah,
that
that we
needs to
shouldn't
be
do.
agendized.
water quality issues, and
I think it'd be better to agendize it. This is a pretty substantive topic. So,
Slippery
Thank you.
slopes.
more later. Other council member reports this evening? None. We'll adjourn to closed session. We have a conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 94956.8. We will report out any action. All right, we're going to come back into open session on the meeting. We have one reportable action regarding conference with real property negotiators. This is regarding property assessors parcel number 070-241-37. The city council this evening has authorized the city manager to move forward with the acquisition of the property. And that is our reportable action this evening. Anything further on this item from the council? No. So we'll close that item and move to the next item, which is to adjourn from closed session. Reportable action, we did that. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We adjourn the meeting at 3 minutes till 9. Thank you very much.